to that pedal show. Yeah. Welcome to that pedal show. Mick here. Hello. Viewers, comments and questions. No Dan this week. He's on a plane to California. Yeah, he's on a plane. He's going to Nam. I'm not. We can talk about that if you like. I've got a sore elbow. I've got a sore hand. I've got a sore back. That's the middle-aged moaning out the way. Welcome to viewers, comments and questions. Like I say, on me Todd this week. We'll take the super chats and we'll get into the chat. Big thanks to BV, who is texting me right now to tell me what's going on. And also Ilias from Jam Pedals. Hello, Ilias. Good to hear from you, buddy. Yeah. Let me know you can hear me and see me okay. I'm just going to check the audio level's good. I think it is. Podcast is recording. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Hope you've had a good week, everyone, since we were last here together. Friday's video went down very well. We had a Dr. Z amplifier and we cranked the bejesus out of it alongside a vintage AC30, which many of you greatly enjoyed. Hopefully there'll be some questions in about that today. This Friday is a good old-fashioned challenge video. Dan versus Mick, a compact rig, would you believe? So see what we can come up with for that. Just got to log in and see who's on. Anyone going to Nam? Dan's going to Nam. I decided not to this year. Slight grumpiness. Didn't really want to go. Didn't really want to travel. But Dan really did. He really wanted to go. He didn't go last year. And he's got some gig rig business in the US. So Dan's gone to sunny himself up a little bit, given that today is, for those of you that listen to these sorts of things, Blue Monday, would you believe? Or at least some sort of social network reminded me this morning. Oh, I thought I turned you off. Evidently not. Yeah, right, that pedal show, that's what we're doing, isn't it? What else is going on? Yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes out at NAMM. There will be some new product launches. We've had a little sneak peek of some of the things that are coming out, a couple of exciting things. Pedals, amps, auxiliary gear, some pretty cool stuff. It's not what it used to be. It used to be, for those of you who don't know what NAMM is, not available, maybe May is what it stands for. No, it's the North American Music Merchants or something like that. It used to be, and it dates right back, right? So 50s and 60s there in California, where the musical instrument world gathers together and A, launches its new products for the year, but B, sells to all the dealers. Back then, presumably predominantly US based, but now it's a truly global affair. But with the advent of the internet, it's become less and less and less relevant in the last few years. So now what it actually is a bit of a jolly for everyone to go and have a nice time in California. And that alone is reason for going. Yeah. All right, let's log in. So yeah, Dan's gone to do that. And hopefully he will be having fun. He's in the air at the moment, so he can't join us via satellite or anything like that. Yeah, he can't. Right, you shut up. Hello to my friend Paul who's watching. Hopefully you're watching, Paul. More on that in a bit. We made Paul laugh last week. Okay, right. Combustion Eng says, hello Mick, just a single TPS leg end today. How well do you hop? I hop pretty good. Paul Matulovic is on. Airfire is on. Ed, hello. Jim is on from Devices. Hello to Devices, just down the road. Andy Edwardson, John 777, Casey Cole 4001. BV, of course. BV, thank you so much for everything you do. There in the chat, Joel Silber. Joel, we're looking forward to seeing you. I think it's this coming Experience Day, is it not? Yes, please bring the G1265 and I shall furnish you with pound notes. Hello, Sailor Effects is on. Joe, hello, mate. Matt Swanton is on. Robert Iboy. Scott Rainsford. Brian Batchelor. Hello, Brian. Lefty, Eagle Ray Rob, Ian Bogle, Robbie F. Oh, loads of old friends on. Robert Lewis. Trolls Jern is on. Tony Moore. The Feel Button. Square Wave Symphonies. Alex, hey buddy, how are you? Daniel Williams. Lots of lovely old friends. So it's good to hear from everyone tonight. Duncan Plexico says, not too late for NAMM, Mick, come on over. I had about 30 seconds because flights are incredibly cheap at the moment, but less so on the hotels, presumably a knock-on from the horrific stuff that has been happening in Los Angeles. Our love and thoughts go out to everyone in the LA area affected by those damn fires. Chris Warburton is on. Hey Chris, hope you're doing okay, buddy. Joel Silber is on. We just mentioned Joel. Matthew Collis Long. Hey Matthew, how are you? Neil Pike. Tom Frank. David Pekarski. How lovely to be here among all our friends. Jolly good. Jolly good. Let us stampede then to the super chats and see what is occurring. Dead air. Always tell Dan off for leaving dead air. That's a thing in radio. I'm going to turn the super chats off now because I probably won't do the full 2 hours given that Dan's not here. And most of you will likely get bored of listening to me for over an hour and a half. So I'll turn the super chats off now and we'll go through all of them and I will answer them all to the best of my ability. Yeah, okay. So first in this week for super chats will be Non-Aligned. Hello, Non-Aligned. Always good to hear from you. What instrument would you create if you received a blank check for a Master Builder Custom Shop voucher and you can build any style or mix any style? Oh man, that's a hard question, isn't it? So you've got a blank check to go to any custom builder. That might be, a lone luthier. It might be the Fender Custom Shop. It might be the Gibson Custom Shop. It might be whoever you might want to say. Get your comments in the chat and tell us what you'd order. I would order, and I'm going to say that because Dan and I are very lucky to have a wonderful selection of guitars, and we're super lucky. So I wouldn't go for another Strat or a Les Paul or a 335 or anything that I've already got. I would have a really nice carved top guitar, like an arch top guitar. I was lucky enough to see quite a lot of the ones that Bill Collings made, and Aaron and some of the other guys there at Collings, as a sort of modern version thereof. But we're talking traditional carved top jazz guitar. Can't play those styles for toffee, but there is something exquisite about the craftsmanship involved in a guitar of that kind, without being disparaging. Even my dear old 61 Strat is a couple of bits of wood bolted together, isn't it? Put together with someone who really knows what they're doing in terms of the setup and everything else. I'm not saying it's easy, I couldn't do it, but a lot of people can. Your carved archtop guitar is a different game. It's a different world of skill and guitar making now. So that's what I would do. Who would I go to? Don't know enough about the market to know who would be the person to go to, but I have played some of the Collings ones and seen them, and my goodness me, they are something else. That's what I'd do. Let us know what you'd have. Fat old guy at 5,000 meters. Fat old guy at 5,000 meters says, how do you deal with electric guitar tones at super quiet coffee shop type gigs? It's really hard for me at acoustic guitar volumes. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, if the acoustic guitar is just pure acoustic and not mic'd up in any way or plugged into a PA system, then that's you're going to have to be whisper quiet. You'd almost be able to hear the strings over the volume you need to be at. if the acoustic guitar is going through some sort of PA system and there's a microphone, then you've got a much better chance, and you could have something like a Princeton or a small amp. I would always have an open back amplifier in a small environment like that, because you get sound out the back of the amp as well, and you can position it such that it can sort of fill the room a little bit. And then it's just down to you being on top of your playing and being heard when you need to be heard, and much less so when the singing's happening, which is riding the volume control. So yeah, I mean, if there is a PA system and the acoustic guitar is going into it and there is microphones, like I said, you should be fine with a Princeton. So the next problem is directionality. So if you take a little guitar, check this out, right? I think, although I'm not sure, that the Hobo Roadie and Music Therapy lads have been up to their old tricks again, and via Alex at Barefaced have managed to deliver this to that pedal show, which, interestingly enough, which we can talk about separately if you want, has an EVM10L speaker. EVM10M2 speaker, which is, for those of you who may know or may not know, it's the speaker that Paul Revere said is the best guitar speaker ever made. They are like rocking horse shit, if you'll excuse the expression. Super rare. Anyway, Alex has put one of these into his Upsetter 1x10 cab design, and I'm hoping it's going to sound huge. More on that later, but you can see how tiny it is, right? It's really tiny. Forget this is a barefaced cab for a second. If this was a normal guitar cab, the directionality of this speaker is, if you're anywhere in its beam, it's really loud, and outside of that you get the ambient sound. So one of the things I will do with an open back combo is put it that way, so the sound is coming out the side and the back in a low volume environment, so nobody's getting the beam unless there's anybody sat at 90 degrees to you. That can work. Have even done the old Roy Buchanan thing, putting it flat on its face so all the sound comes out the back and disperses if you've got to be really quiet. But that's all a bit extreme. So that's what I would do. You could put something in front of it. Check these out. So Hoovy at D-Flux, Ainsley Lister uses these, and when I did some gigs with Ainsley last year, I took my 2-rock and used one of Ainsley's deflector panels. These are flipping brilliant. So what they do is, I hope you can see this, they go underneath the front of the cab like that. And it's sort of a modern version of a plexiglass screen that you would see someone like John Boehner-Moja using, Joe Bonamassa using. And that's a slightly more refined version of it. So you lose that directionality of the beam of the speaker. And for that, you could use a bit of wood, a chair, anything, just to stop that amp going all the way forwards, and dispersing, make it disperse so that no one's getting it straight. I hope that was enough information. That's what I would do. But just literally turning your amp through 90 degrees so it faces that way and that way can be quite an effective way of reducing the beam. Let's see what people are saying in the chat. Tim Halligan is saying, nice to see the old Duchess is still around. It very much is. I've got this little, when that cab turned up, I thought, right, this could be the ultimate rotary speaker thing. So I'm going to make up a little external rig that's got the HK Rotosphere, a reverb tank and maybe something else in it. Power it off the Duchess and see if that can be like a small wet solution. It depends how big that cab sounds. So I've got high hopes. I'll vlog it so you get to come along on the journey, but I've got high hopes that cab's going to sound pretty big, or at least big enough to sit alongside my main amp and do the wet job and the rotary speaker job. Let's see. John Boehner-Moja is a totally different genre, says Combustioning. Yeah, indeed. David Tompkins says, do those deflectors feel like they would snap easily? I'm interested in them. No, I mean, Ains chucks them in the back of his van every night, and if you look at his tour dates, you'll see how extensively he tours. And they just, I mean, they're a bit awkward, right? Because they're a bit of an awkward shape. So it can't really go flat. Well, it can. It could just sit on the top of everything if you've got whatever. But I was really impressed. I was really, really impressed with what they do. So anyway. David Tompkins, a small wet solution. Yeah, I know. Scott Curry says, Weber make beam blockers that work pretty well. Yeah, I had a couple of those in my Lone Star for a minute. So it's like a long, well, the ones I had anyway, were a long piece of steel that go from one speaker mount to the other across the center of the speaker, and in the middle, like a sort of, like a, for want of a better description, a foam bit in the middle that's the deflector. They work pretty good. Good. Oh, actually, Mr. Wit 30 comes up with a really excellent suggestion finally on the quieter acoustic gig situation. He says, I've backed up many a singer-songwriter with a 1 to 10 or 20 watt tube amp. I really like using my White Falcon for this situation. That is a great shout, using a semi-acoustic guitar. You know, maybe you don't stretch to a White Falcon. I've used my Casino in those situations, the Gretsch 52, 54, 22. It just has a bit of a softer attack than a fully solid body electric guitar. So that's a really good shout. Thank you for that, Mr. Wit 30. Moving right along. Andrew Jones. Hey, Andrew. He says, Mick, how do you control extraneous string noise? Is my amp and pedals dialed in too hot? I can't get clear singing solos without getting the string noises. For solos, is it my bad technique? I'm trying to mute. Okay, so string noise, acoustic and electric, is part of the electric guitar sound. I've heard bits of software that remove it, and it's just weird if you remove it. For example, if you're trying to record an acoustic guitar and you get what we used to call the seagulls. So you're trying to play nice, what does he say, windswept and meaningful folk music. Our dear friend Greg Koch. And it's this sound, isn't it? Which on a fully acoustic guitar gets amplified by the sound box. And out it comes. So your string noise is coming from a couple of places. So the wound strings, obviously, and on most electric guitars you've got 3 wound strings. You're going to get that. So you could work on just keeping your technique clean, so that instead of going, you go. So you're sliding up the strings, and that's what's making the noise, right? Hopefully this mic's picking that up quite nicely. So you just lift off gently, and you get a little bit. So maybe that's one technique. Damping. I'm damping. Still getting the noise. And of course, the more gain you add, the more that noise is going to jump through. So I do think it is partly about having cleaner technique. And I think there's all sorts of stuff that Dan and I probably do totally second nature now that is hard to explain. But I think it's in the way in which you lift off and put down again, making sure that you're not doing that drag over every string. It happens also on the unwound strings, but maybe to a lesser extent. But yeah, I mean, that's all part of that, just learning to play cleanly. And if you come from a background where you start off playing loud, that's the stuff that happens naturally because you have to make it happen naturally. If you come from a background of playing quietly, it's the stuff you don't really notice. And then once you are loud, it's like, oh my God, where did all that noise come from? So I don't know if anyone else has got any better suggestions than that, but You don't want to eliminate it completely because it is part of the sound of electric guitar. But if it's louder than the sound of the notes, then yeah, you've got a problem. Is your EQ set into extremes? Like you got loads and loads of treble and presence rolled on. One other thing just to try. I don't know what kind of strings you use. Obviously, a string that's a little bit older won't squeak so much, and there are different metallic compounds you can get for strings. So most strings, if you just go and buy your Ernie Ball Slinkies or your D'Addario XLs or whatever it is you buy, EXLs I think they're called, they're nickel wound steel, but it's not pure nickel, it's a compound of nickel and steel, I guess, and they can sound quite bright. You can get other compounds of metal that sound even brighter, and you can get some that are duller. So obviously, if you go all the way to something like a flat wound string that you'd get on old jazz masters or jazz guitars or basses, then they won't give you any string noise, or they'll give you virtually no string noise whatsoever. For a while there, and I don't know if they still do, D'Addario, or D'Addario for those of you in the States, did what was called a half wound string. So they ground them off halfway, instead, not all the way to a flat, but they just sort of ground them off so they were half wound, and that was less string noise. Finally, I would suggest most of the higher end string brands do pure nickels, and that means the wrap wire is a much higher nickel content, which is a bit softer and squeaks a bit less. They sound more vintage. Don't know. So that could be worth a try as well. So maybe try some different types of strings. Good. However, if you're one of those people that never changes their strings and they're dull anyway, then that's not the problem. I hope that helps. Let's just see what anyone else is coming in with. Gordon Rankin says, sorry I'm late. Legends, chilly day here in Cincinnati. Hey Gordon, good to hear from you. Jim is saying maybe a noise gate or a suppressor pedal. Yeah, I mean, personally, I would advise against that, because really you should wrap it up in your technique if you can. Just, you know, strive to be a better guitar player. That's much better to, what's the analogy? Replaster the wall than paper over the cracks, I would say. Happens every time in acoustic guitars, says Raoul. Yeah, it does, but it is part of the acoustic guitar sound. It is part of the sound, and if it's not there, it does sound weird. So don't try and get rid of it completely. Lemon Tree, coated strings, yeah, of course. Who was first into the coated strings market? Maybe Elixir. They did a deal with Gore, you know, the people that do Gore-Tex materials for outdoor gear and stuff like that, and all other kinds of things. And the first coated strings were almost rubbery feeling, actually. They've got a lot better now, so that's a good shout as well. Thank you, Lemon Tree. Yes. Good. Right. Sorry. Gies van der Esmorite. Gies van der Esmorite. You'll have to tell us how to say your name, Gies, and I apologise for saying it wrong every week. Thank you for your super chat. It says, hi Mick, when you play loud in a smallish room with a drummer and a bass, how do you set reverb and delay, if at all? Yeah, well, definitely at all. I use reverb and delay all the time. Depending on what you... So let's take reverb first then. Two schools of reverb that Dan and I would probably both agree on. One is your bass level of spring reverb, if you like it, and I do, and I like quite a lot. And in the same way that if you listen to a rock music mix, right? So I don't know who it might be. Bryan Adams, U2, Pearl Jam, whatever. Pick your favourite rock band. Everything in that is much wetter than you would think. And if you heard some of the tracks soloed, you wouldn't believe how wet it is. And that goes for, I don't mean in every single rock record ever made. I mean in a majority of pop rock music. Now, that goes for playing live in a band too. You can get away with huge amount of delay and reverb, particularly once we get into the realms of digital reverbs, which is my number 2 reverb. Number 1 reverb is the standard level of spring reverb in the amp. I set that to where, this is going to sound too obvious for words, I set it to where it's not overpowering. So when I finish a phrase, it's not like, oh God, why is all that reverb on there? So I set it just below that. Digital reverb, from a personal perspective, and I appreciate everyone does this differently, is very much, so the spring reverb in the amp is always on, or just always. And then maybe if you were doing a song that requires a heavy level of spring reverb for whatever reason, I walk back to the amp and turn it up. Digital reverb, in the way I use it anyway, and I think Dan's the same, is a very specific effect, and it is used for a very specific sound. So it's not an always on thing. It's if I need a giant cathedral reverb to sit in a very open passage while somebody is singing or whatever, or it requires, if I'm doing Jimmy and it needs that Olympic Studios short room sound, or big room sound as far as Olympic goes anyway, but not cavernous, then I'll use it for that, and that's dialed in per song. And one of the reasons Dan and I love pedals so much, particularly the CXM78, but any reverb pedal that's got a mix knob on it, is because if it's too much, you just bend down and turn it down a bit, turn the mix down a bit. And I think where a lot of people, I appreciate this is a bit of a long answer, but I think where a lot of people get confused, and maybe what the core of your question is, very often on our delay and reverb pedals, the mix is set 8 AM, like 1 or 2 on the dial, because you're hitting it so hard with an overdrive pedal that any more than that and it's just overwhelming. Whereas perhaps if you're new to it and you get your overdrive, your reverb pedal or your delay pedal, you're like, well, surely it's got to be up noon somewhere. That would make more sense. I paid all this money for this bloody reverb pedal and I've got to have it at 1. What the hell's that about? Well, yeah, you do. Or you don't. You can have it wherever you want, but that's where I would have it. So I would set those to taste. Delay, same thing. I'd never ever have an always on delay unless it was a slapback for sort of general rock and roll type playing. But delay will always be a specific parameter for the song. So it might be a quarter note for a specific solo. It might be the quarter and dotted eighth. It might be whatever it might be, but it's never an always on thing, and it's very much to taste. So if you, I don't know, take the solo from Vertigo from U2 just as an example. If you listen to that, I can't remember what the subdivisions are. They're probably, I would imagine they're the Edge's usual quarter note and dotted eighth, but in any case, they've got to be in time, those repeats, to play that solo properly. And if you don't have the delay, it's just wrong. It's not right. I hope I'm thinking of the right song. So that would be a per song thing. And it's literally, again, the reason we love pedals so much is because where you set your effect mixes when you're at home might be way higher so that you can just hear them clearly. And then the minute you get to the gig, it's like, whoa, crazy, overpowering. So just being able to turn them down, just lean down, turn it down, get it to where you want it. You're off to the races. I hope that helps. We'll just finally mention the way Andy Timmons does it and the way Dan has started to do it. So Dan has his wet on an expression pedal, the wet mix, so it is continually variable. So if you're playing clean and soft, you want more wet mix, so you just roll a bit more on. If you're hammering it with 3 overdrive pedals, obviously it's going to excite those reverbs and delays into much more level, so you need to just bring it back a bit. So it's constantly variable off your foot, which is the equivalent of leaning down and changing it with your hand, but obviously you're doing it with your foot. So perhaps you could try that. That would be worth it. Most modern digital delay pedals and digital reverbs have some function for expression control for mix. Yeah. The one exception would be something like an old school tape delay, which you don't change it on, and that is always on. And that's a cool thing in itself, but I think that's a separate world. Yeah, that's what I would say about that. See what anyone else is saying. Mr. Wit30 says delay can actually replace reverb. Yeah, it can. You'll see that in this Friday's video where I forget to put a reverb pedal on my board and manage to choose amps that don't have reverb in. Dope. Which for somebody who loves reverbs is really dumb. So as you say, you can set a level of delay. It's usually, well, it's usually a slapback type thing. Robin Ford does this. He has reverb as well, but he always has the delay on and it kind of does that job. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Combustion Eng, would you ever upgrade an amp reverb? I'm not overly fond of my Fender's Spring. I've never got into it. I have replaced tanks before because they failed. But yeah, I'm sure you could. They're quite picky about how much signal they receive and return, and not all of them are the same spec, so you'd need to check that. Yeah, I guess people do. Groovy. Right, moving right along. Sean Jeremilatos. Hey Sean, good to hear from you. He says, hi Mick. I saw Ariel Posen do a solo show last weekend and it was phenomenal. We're lucky to have him out there. Met him at the merch table and somehow bought his Hudson Broadcast AP2 pedal. So cool. Nice one, Sean. He's such a talent. He's such an incredible talent. So much feel, such a great player, great singer. And as you say, it's a treat to have in this climate of music. Not that I want to be down on it, but in this climate of music, for that to exist is a wonderful thing. And I think if you play guitar, you're kind of duty bound to go and watch them, because you'll learn something and you'll see the extent to which the art can be taken. And yeah, nice one. Hope you enjoyed that. Jim B, hello Jim. Jim says, Mick, as a bass player that plays guitar, it's interesting to hear your experience going in the other direction. What is your most and least favourite part? Great question. So thanks for that, Jim. Regular viewers will know that I've got a dep gig, although I haven't done any gigs yet, not least because I fractured a bone in my hand, so I've had to jib out of most things. Playing dep bass in a band, and the reason I wanted to do it, and this to your question is what's my most favourite part, is I don't feel any pressure. And to be sort of semi-serious for a second, one result of doing something like that pedal show is for right, wrong or whatever, there is a certain level of heaviness on mine and Dan's shoulders every time we pick up a guitar in public, because someone's going to be videoing it. Somebody's going to be expecting a stunning performance or whatever. And I appreciate a lot of that comes out of your own brain, but it can get pretty heavy. And sometimes that freedom of just being able to play freely and have fun is kind of overshadowed by that a little bit. We're not famous. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there can be an expectation of ourselves and also of others that it's going to be amazing. And if you turn up to a cafe gig with a, Princeton and a Strat and nothing else, and that's what you've got, people are like, what the hell, you're the pedal show guy, this ain't right. But sometimes that's what you're doing, right? Anyway, so one of the reasons for wanting to play bass is I don't have any of that, and I don't have to measure myself against all my mates and the people that come on this show and Dan. I can just play bass and be an enthusiast and be I don't want to say substandard, but be in need of significant improvement as a bass player, and just have fun playing stuff like Muse, Alanis Morissette, what else? Pretenders, stuff that I probably wouldn't play in any of my own bands. So that's what I love about it the most, the freedom and the abandonment, and some of that kind of remembering what it was like to just be so into it from an enthusiast level. And that's what I love most about playing bass. What do I like least about it? I still don't understand the sonics of it. So if I'm mixing something or if I'm recording a band, I get it, I understand. But actually playing bass with a drummer, it's like, where are you loud? Where are you not loud? For me, the perfect bass tone is, James Jamerson on all the soul stuff. It's Pino Palladino in literally anything he ever did, apart from maybe Wherever I Lay My Hat, That's My Home. But certainly the John Mayer stuff, the D'Angelo stuff, the music that I really like that grooves. So for me, the bass sits under the kick drum. In a lot of pop music, it's kind of not that, and maybe it's more middly and it's got a bit more overdrive on it. So it's just understanding that and understanding where to be loud and where not to be loud. And then the hardest thing about, the thing I love about guitar is you can play quiet, soft, loud, hard, and everything in between, and that's all part of your voice as a guitar player. It's about exploring the full dynamic range behind the beat, on the beat, anticipating, just making everyone feel sick by being around the beat. Most of the bass stuff that I've done so far, you can't really do any of that. You need to have a consistent sound at a consistent volume and a consistent note attack and be on. And so the discipline in playing bass feels like something closer to being a proper musician, and it feels closer to work. It feels like actual work because it's so damn physical, pushing those strings down and getting every note clear out. So that's, I wouldn't say it's my least favourite part, but it's the most challenging bit. My least favourite part is that no one gives a shit about bass players. I've really come to understand that. And I'm sorry, bass players, but it's true. Anyway, yeah. I hope that was an adequate answer, Jim. Anthony Mapplethorpe. Hello, Anthony. Thanks for being with us. Says, I'm specking my first real rig in years, starting with the amp. And on the list of the Victory MK Clean or a V140, a Two Rock Studio Signature or a classic Reverb, Hampstead 60 RT and Sherbella, Bad Cat Era, 30. It's hard to AB in the UK. Oh, man. I mean, you've just listed a lot of amp royalty there, and you've listed a huge amount of tonal ground, and it's so hard. I'm trying to think of an analogy. That kid at school that just wanted to be the doctor, right? He wanted to be a doctor or whatever he wanted to be, an architect. And he was never going to be anything else. That's what he was. That's kind of how I was with my Two Rock. It's like, that's the amp I want. I know it's the amp I want. There's no alternative. Boom. Easy peasy. Most of the rest of us at school were like, I haven't got a clue what I want to do. So you need to do a few things and get fired a few times to figure out what you might be suited to and good at. And I think it's a bit like that with guitar amps. Dan and I were both lucky to start playing really young. So back then, given that you had no funds, and once you'd made your decision, you were stuck with it, unless you wanted to go through the hassle of selling it and buy another one. Pre-internet, remember? So one of the great benefits was that you'd get the thing. In my case, it was one of those late 70s twin reverbs, the 135 watt one, which I don't think was 135 watts, but that's what it said on the back. Because I thought that was what Stevie Ray Vaughan used, which of course was not true. So I plugged my Strat in, turn it up to 10, and it's like the flattest, nastiest sound you've ever heard. It's like, okay. So I had to learn how to use it, and then whatever happens, it blows up or you get it repaired, and then you get the next thing, and your knowledge increases because you've had to use this stuff. Now, if you fast forward and go, okay, I got a bit of cash, I can buy whatever I want, more or less, that's more difficult, because then the decision moves in here. It comes away from here and week in, week out learning, and it goes into here and you start. So I would try and get rid of this if you can, and just go with the thing that talks to your heart and the thing that you've heard the most on various places, and get that. Because without spending quality time with these things, you'll never really know. And of course, it's going to be a very expensive learning process to have to get to know all of those things. So I can't make a decision for you. Your heart will be leaning in a certain direction. I think that counts for a lot with gear. Because clearly, any one of those amps that you've mentioned is more than capable of doing a thoroughly professional job. So, yeah. Studio C, I'll talk to you about the Two Rocks, actually, and the Victories. Because I know all of those amps really well. Studio Sig or Classic Reverb. Unless you can turn a Classic Reverb up, get the Studio Sig. It's very rare I can turn my Classic Reverb up at a gig. And if it's ticking over, you may as well get the Studio Sig, which is an utterly brilliant amplifier. Utterly brilliant amplifier. And I would say the same with the MK Clean and the V140. I mean, the MK Clean is a very different kind of purchase, right? Because that's a really serious deal. You're going to order it in the finish you want. It's going to cost you many thousands. And if you want to go through that as the sort of experience of doing it, we know that it sounds unbelievable. Great. If you're talking about straight bang for buck, is this thing going to do what I want? I would pick up a used V140 from somewhere, because you'll be spending like $4,000 less or $3,000 less for a really, really goodly dollop of the tone. So I think the buying decision is in a different place. You know, going through the custom order process, wanting to do that, that's one thing. Straight, can I put a rig together that's going to sound good with this for the most sensible money? It's the V140 every day of the week. Yeah, I hope that's some food for thought. See what people are saying. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Cup of Noodles says, is digital reverb out of phase in a wet dry setup? It is if it's out of phase, but most aren't. What's going to cause the polarity flip is the pedal itself, or the amp you're using, or the speaker cab. So you need to check each one of those things. But by the time it gets to the other amp, only one phase flip is possible. It's either, or polarity flip, it's either in polarity or it's not. Now, if you're talking about the latency of the digital reverb, that's one of the reasons Dan and I will only ever use anything with analog dry-through, because the analog dry-through stays non-delayed in terms of latency, so that's fine. You can flip the polarity and get it right, no phase problems. The reverb doesn't have, the reverb signal itself doesn't have the dry in it, so it doesn't matter if that's, you know, a couple milliseconds behind because it's been digitally processed. That doesn't matter in terms of polarity. So that's why we always use analog dry-through. If the analog isn't dry-through and is digitally processed, it's always delayed. You're always going to have a phase problem. You will never get it in phase, and it sounds weak by comparison because the bottom end just goes away. Matt McGrath, hey Matt, good to hear from you. Happy Monday, Legends, says Matt. Yeah, happy Monday to everyone. And I hope no one falls for that Blue Monday crap. Mick, please take a question from the chat. All right, let's do that then. We just did one, but I will do another one. Jaco Pastorius, says Sean, with question mark. Well, yes, from me. If you, just as a bit of a tangent, at your leisure, call up his eponymous record, Jaco Pastorius, the black and white picture of him on the cover, full headshot. There's a couple, well, you should listen to the whole thing start to finish, but the first track, Come On, Come Over, which I think has got Sam and Dave singing on it. Oh my God, what a bass line. And then Portrait of Tracy, we know all about, obviously. If you've never heard Portrait of Tracy by Jaco Pastorius, please put it on at your earliest convenience. It's just a stunning piece of music played on the big guitar. Yeah. Donna Lee, of course. Actually, Donna Lee's the first track, to be fair. The Charlie Parker tune, I think. I think that's the first track. Yeah, that one. Played on the bass. Anthony Maplethorpe says, no one gives a shit about keys players either. Yeah, I know. I know. I know. I know. Oh yeah, I was looking for a question from the chat, wasn't I? From Matt McGrath. Sorry if the focus is jiggling around. It needs to see my eye in order to stay focused. Hopefully it knows that I'm supposed to be there. Right, Captain Jazz says, I want a Roland Jazz chorus, but can't decide between the 40 and the 120. What's your advice when you aren't sure if an amp will be loud enough, but can't get one to try without committing to buy? You will know, Captain Jazz, for the playing that you do currently, how loud you can be. It would be helpful to know what you're using currently. It does overdrive quite nicely, the 40. I think it's got a separate overdrive knob. I would have thought for most, like if you're playing solo in a duo in a bar, then I would have thought the 40 is going to be enough. I don't know, but I'm assuming that unless you play loud, the 120, no one needs the 120. Do they? I would have thought the 40. They do a 60, don't they do a 60? That could be a great compromise. And then, of course, there's the reality of carrying the damn thing around. Now, given that it's a transistor amp, they're not quite as brutal as a 212 tube amp, but it might be that the 40 suits you much better in a from a portability point of view. Further, if your ensemble or whatever it is you're playing in does have a PA system, you can always put it through the PA as well to give you a bit extra. But I would have thought, unless you're playing really loud gigs, certainly most gigs I go to these days, stage volume is, radically lower than it was back when it was all fields. I would have thought the 40 would be enough. Don't know. But depends how loud you want it. If anyone wants to come in on that, that would be very helpful. Talat Atkor wants to know, JTM 45 or Princeton as a pedal platform? Depends how loud you play. If you play quiet, Princeton, they just sound magic at low volume Princetons. But the minute you go past 3 on the volume, you're into overdrive. So no good after that in terms of headroom if you want headroom. But if you want the amp to overdrive when you kick it, Princeton. If you play up from there, JTM 45. What a great amp. Because it will go crunchy if you hit it with pedals, but lovely clean noises. JTM 45s, to my knowledge, don't have reverb, do they? Don't think so. Whereas Princeton does, and that's a big deal for me anyway. So that would be a help. And of course, JTM 45, if you go combo version, is 2 12-inch speakers. So the sound stage compared to a Princeton is night and day. Princeton sounds pretty small. It's a 110. It's great sound, but it's 1 10-inch speaker in a small box. JTM 45 by comparison is 2 12s in a big box. Or you might go for a head and a separate cab. So that makes a huge difference too. Yeah, JTM 45 for me, just because I like volume. But Brian Mill says, if you've got bass in a van, you've got gigs for life. I agree. I know lots and lots of brilliant guitar players who don't have a gig. I don't know any brilliant bass players who aren't horrendously busy. So, by choice, I mean. I know a few that don't want to play anymore, but if they're actually playing, bass players are busy, right? Thomas Eichinger. Hi, Thomas. He says, hi, D&M. I built myself a DIY hotcake, Crowther Audio hotcake. It's amazing, but lacks a bit in treble or presence, as they call it. Is this normal? I saw that Dan has his presence knob also at about 3 o'clock. Okay. It's not a reverse presence knob, is it? I don't know the hotcake well. Dan does, obviously. Sometimes on pedals, it gets darker as you turn it around. Thorpe Warthog, for example. So just check it's not that. I would have thought, having built it, you would know that. But there's plenty of bite and presence in the hotcake if you turn it around. And I thought that was a big deal about the hotcake. I thought that was one of the hotcake's things. So if anyone has any more information on that and wants to chime in, please do. But given that you've built it, presumably you can just change the values of whatever is determining the frequency of that, and make it brighter. Can you? Yeah. The other thing to say about Dan, of course, is that he's hitting it with a Telecaster into a very bright amp. So you've got two bright things either side. So it could be that, I don't know what guitars you use or what amps you use. Maybe that the source or the subsequent amplifier isn't really letting that presence come to the fore. So that could be a thing. I don't know how easy they are to get hold of now. Hotcakes, you used to be able to pick them up used for really sensible money, but I rather suspect that isn't the case anymore. Because say you could pick one up, A/B it, compare it, and then sell it again. But yeah, congrats on the build anyway. Even getting the damn thing to work, that's pretty serious. Paul Matulovic, he says, in need of prosthesis. Only see one leg end today. Just got a Crazy Tube Circuits Unobtainium Raw. If you've had the pleasure, I'd love your thoughts. Seems like it would be up your alley. Yes, we've got one. What's the difference between the Raw one and the normal one then? So Crazy Tube Circuits Unobtainium, I believe, is a clon and a Dumble, is it? Or is it something else? I'm just going to go onto their websites. Unobtainium. Did I turn the super chats off? That was the other question I was just going to check. I did. Great. I will answer all the super chats that we've had. I think Jamal Hill, Richardson Albini is the last one in tonight. Right, Unobtainium Raw. Okay, so the Raw's got, yeah. So the Crazy Tube Circuits Unobtainium, sorry for those of you that are way ahead of me, is Dumble and clon tones in the pedal in that really great dual pedal format that Crazy Tube have gone with. There's a really good one coming up in 2 weeks' time. They've done one that's going after AC/DC tones in a big way, which is really, really cool. The Heat Seeker. So the Raw has got the germanium transistors, right? The Magic. Actually, no, because... No, sorry. Right. Clarification time. The Magic components in the clon were the germanium diodes, right? The bit that did the clipping. This has got germanium transistors doing the overdrive, doing the, gain makeup. So we've got OC45 transistors. That sounds really cool, actually. We use the germanium diodes. Yeah, so that's got germanium diodes, as we said. So I'm just assuming that you're sort of getting rid of the op-amp part and replacing it with germanium transistors, which sounds really cool. We do have one here. We'll plug it in. It'd be great to get a listen. That does sound really cool, actually, Paul. Hello, Sailor Official. Joe is on. Hello, Joe. Just check BV is updating me with information. Probably important information. Yes, Hotcake is flat at 0 and turn to add treble. Thank you, BV, for that. So it's not a reverse one, as I thought it might be. Yeah. Joe is on from Hello Sailor. Hello, Joe. He says, hey, Mick, awesome to see that vintage Vox roaring. More loud vintage amps, please. Quick one to settle a debate. Is it Z or Z? Dr. Z, Zvex, and the rest of the alphabet soup. Got to be Z, hasn't it? Because they're Americans and that's what they say. Like Mesa and Mesa. It's thin ice though, isn't it? Because there are certain Americanized pronunciations we'll allow, like Los Angeles and San Francisco, not Los Angeles or whatever it would be in Spanish. But we must say Mesa properly, being a Spanish word. So, yeah. I guess if language didn't evolve, we'd all be talking like cave people. Or some sort of weird Shakespearean dialect. Yeah, it just evolves, doesn't it? But Dan and I made a gag of the Z and the Z thing. Hope you're well, Joe. And thank you for your generosity. Thank you everyone for your generosity in the questions. We appreciate it. Tony Moore says, I found a new sound. Tony Moore has found a new sound. Guitar volume on 8 into a fuzz face, high gain, then into a big muff, low gain. I'm using the Joe Bonamassa fuzz face and the KCFX mohair. It's massive. Love to hear you try it. Best of both worlds. First time for me. Yeah, that's interesting. Those of you who watch the show regularly will know that we're massive fans of all fuzz pedals, particularly in my case, fuzz faces. And the great thing about traditional fuzz face design, Joe Bonamassa one included, I think the standard Joe Bonamassa one was black, wasn't it? But bless him, dear old Joe gave me this, which was the limited edition copper one with some nice germaniums in that him and George Trips did. And I think I'm right in saying they sort of voiced it because he tends to use more, at the time he was using more humbuckers and singles, so they voiced it to sound good with humbuckers. Anyway, the nature of a fuzz face is that when you turn the guitar volume down, particularly, well, actually single coils and humbuckers, but traditional single coils on a Strat, for example, when you turn them down, the thing cleans up. But what you also get is this really glassy, clean, trebly sound. So normally on a Strat, as Strat players will know, if you don't have any tomfoolery in the guitar or anything else, when you turn it down, it gets dull, right? Fuzz face takes all that away and you just get the most beautiful glassy clean sound. And if you listen, once you know what it sounds like and go and listen to Jimi Hendrix again, you'll hear that some of his clean sounds are very much that. So you're hitting this. The other weird thing about a fuzz face is it has quite low input impedance and quite high output impedance, which is the opposite of what you would normally get in a guitar pedal. So you've got this unusual impedance relationship now hitting your big muff. And I guess that's what's creating that awesome sound you were talking about. We should try it. We should try it. I'd be interested to know how you're getting on with noise, because one of the slight downsides of using a fuzz face cranked and down a bit is you still get you get plenty of noise. But yeah, all right, we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go. Although actually, I've said yes. You did say big muff. You did say big muff. Yeah, nice. Alex, Square Wave Symphonies. Hello, buddy. Good to hear from you. He says, good evening, legend. Couldn't think of a question, so I'll just say thank you for all you do. Bless you, buddy. Much love. Feel free to take a question from the chat. Then let's do that. Let's do that. Right. All I'm looking for is a question mark. Let's see who's got a question mark. Matt Hernan says, what did I miss? Just the usual crap, Matt. So don't worry about it. Oh, come on. Give me a question. Right. No, there's a conversation going on between Eagle Ray Rob and Gordon Rankin about cathode followers in Dumbles. That's something that I've never really understood. I did get someone to explain it to me once, and well, yeah, still don't understand. Come on then. Come on, all I'm looking for is a question. Well, there aren't any questions. Sorry. We'll wait for another one to come in. Okay, right. Neil Tupman. Hey, Neil. Good to hear from you, buddy. He says, what are the best solderless patch cables to use of a new pedalboard build? I have 16 to make to feed my new Quartermaster QMX8. Dan and I both love the Evidence Audio SIS system. Screw-in solderless. Dan loves it more than I do. It's very expensive. And briefly, it has a solid core, right? So the wire has a solid core. And in the end of the jack plug is threaded. So if I had a microscopic lens, here's a screw-in solderless jack plug. If you could see down there, which I don't think you can, the connection to the tip is threaded. So when you put it on the cable and you twist it, the solid core hot cable screws into the end of the thing and it won't pull out. Or it will, but it would take some significant force. The ground is then made by the shield touching the case of the thing, and you screw it on. And as long as you use a pair of pliers and screw them on tight like that, it's a really, really fantastic, reliable joint. Where they get less reliable is when you keep unplugging them and plugging them back in, and you can get fatigue in the cable, and sometimes it can snap, which is really annoying. Very unusual for it to snap in the middle, but it could snap in the plug. And also what happens is this comes unscrewed a little bit. So you do have to make sure they're nipped up tight all the time. And as long as you're not constantly pulling your pedal board to bits, they're just a fantastic solution because they're quick to make. You can make them to the exact length. A lot of people swear by George L's. I would say everything I've just said about these relates to George L's as well, but they are much less robust because they don't screw in. It's a push fit connection, and the more you use them, the less robust they become. That said, I've had a couple of George L's patch cables that I've had for 10 years that have never gone wrong. And then there are many other kinds. The Free the Tone ones are pretty good. Dunlop does a kit. Boss do a kit. But the reason we would choose these is because of that screw-in hot cable being a solid core, so the connection is always good. It's always good. So that's what we would say. Although I've taken to just soldering now. I just solder because I get fed up remaking these. So I've just got ones of varying lengths, which is, if you want your board really tidy, they need to be the exact length. So this makes sense. If you're doing what I do all the time, the board is never the same 2 weeks in a row. So it's just easy to have them, a given length, and then all the mess can sit in underneath the board. If you can't deal with that, Evidence Audio SIS is what we would recommend. Dan's sent boards off around the world with leading artists with those in, so we trust them. BV is reminding everyone that pedal show has monthly giveaways for patrons. We do. We had an absolute bumper one in January as well, and there's a big one coming up in February too. So if you're not a patron, perhaps consider visiting patreon.com/thatpedalshow and joining us there. Most of the regular viewers know this, right? The way TPS stays alive, as it were, is we make the most of the money we get in comes from selling merchandise, right? That's about 70% of our income. And, whether you want t-shirts or pedals or whatever it is, we sell them at that pedal show store, and that's the vast majority of what funds this show. If that stops, we're dead and off the air. The rest of it's made up by, you get some money from Google advertising. So when you start up a video and you watch it and there's a Google ad, please watch it because we get paid for that. It's not very much money, but it certainly helps. We do Patreon, so people pledge cash to be a patron of that pedal show. That helps greatly as well. That's our third biggest source of income. and we do monthly giveaways on that. So yeah, just in case you didn't know. I think there is an assumption that YouTubers are absolutely drowning in money given to them by YouTube. It's not true. In order to get to anywhere near that, you need to add another naught at least to what we do on that pedal show in terms of views and subscribers. So yeah. Yeah, not that we're not, you know, it's not a heart, I'm not, you know. Plexico, Duncan, you said this earlier. You said, not too late for now, Mick. Come on over. Yeah, I just didn't, it's funny, you know. I just don't want to travel. I don't want to travel at the moment. I don't, not through any fear. Obviously the horrible fires in Los Angeles, they hadn't happened when the NAMM decision was made, so that wasn't part of it. So yeah, I don't know. NAMM's really interesting. It's so cool to see old friends, because if you've never been, Anaheim is basically taken over by NAMM convention, and you can be, if you've been in this game for a while, which, you know, Dan and I are lucky enough to have been in the game for, or I've been in the game for 30 years pretty much. 28 years. You can be walking home to your hotel room at 3 a.m. down Harbour Boulevard or somewhere and see 3 people that you know, and it from anywhere in the world, and it's really, really brilliant for that, and that is a good enough excuse to go. But business wise, it used to be worth it for everybody. I'm just not sure that it is anymore, so it's hard to justify it in terms of cost. So to go there for a jolly for a week, I think if you've got the time and business is great, then brilliant, go. If you don't have the time and business isn't so good, it is a much, much harder decision. So yeah, that's why I'm not going. Sounds pretty grumpy, doesn't it? Sounds pretty grumpy. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. Jamal Hill Richardson Albini. Any news about the new Mythos collab? I believe Zach posted on Instagram about it this week. Honestly, it's the simplest idea. It was so simple when I suggested it to him in the first place. He was like, really? And as we've developed it, we've just come to really love it. So those of you who've been to Experience Days knows what it is, because there's been a proto on my board as we've been tweaking it and listening to it. It's an extension of the Argo Octafuzz, and it has a particular extra thing that it does that's just completely utility. And the reason, I'll explain this when we make the video, but the reason I asked him to do it is because usually if I take a pedal board anywhere, I just love the Cobb style Octafuzz, you know, Prescription Electronics Cobb style Octafuzz, which is the one that Doyle Bramwell uses. Doyle Bramwell. And it's the one I love, right? So whether it's the Dan Drive one, or the Dan Drive does a really good one, Zach does a really brilliant one. So whatever it is, if you want a bit of that, and it's not just for Jimi Hendrix, right? I use it for all kinds of things. Just anyway. And it doesn't really do the Hendrix sound. It's not that kind of octave. It's that pedal that you want to stick on your little pedal board, but it's probably the first thing that gets kicked off because you don't have the space. However, the other thing that I always want on my pedal board is always on my pedal board. So I said, why don't we stick it in a box together? And that way I can have them both all the time. And I rather hope that you lot will agree that it's a good idea, and it's a nice to have. So I'm not sure when it's going to be launched. He's done the final artwork. I think he's had the cases made. So we should be able to launch it in the next month or so, I rather hope. The first ones will be available from that Pedal Show store, and then following that it'll be available everywhere, I hope, judging on our last conversation. So, yep. Hopefully that's enough teasing for you, Jamal. It's a trip, isn't it? What a flipping trip to know these people and say, can you make one of these? And they don't laugh you out of the room. What a trip. What a trip. So that will be all the super chai. Thank you very much to everyone who's super chatted. Let's get in the chat. I'll probably stay on till about 6:30 tonight, if that's all right with you guys. I appreciate that listening to one voice for an hour and a half is can be difficult. I do want to give not that I'm in any position to do so, but I just want to give a shout out to Tom Bukovac. Most of you watching this will know who Tom Bukovac is, and if you don't, please go and check him out. 501 Chorus Echo on YouTube, Tom Bukovac. And again, sorry this is old information for most of you, but Tom is just the most immense guitar player. You know, first call Nashville guy, plays on everything and everybody, really, really. And he's just the sweetest dude. He is the best guitar player. And every day he puts out a video, just him and his iPhone sat there. And I've been catching up on a few episodes, and he's the best. He's the best. And it's very, very like that thing. It's 51% motivating, 49% totally crushing. But he's done the work, and he continues to do the work. Totally devoted. Unbelievable, unbelievable. So, Tom, thank you for the inspiration. And please watch Tom Bukovac if you don't already. I got there because it's usually just him doing his videos, which I could watch for 3 days. So, yeah. So Paul Matulovic is saying, okay, the raw version of the CTC Unobtainium has OC45 transistors for clipping in addition to the standard diodes. So it sounds like it's doing... Hello, Rosie. You going to come on here and say hello then? I know your favourite guy isn't here, but you coming up here, Rose?
Yes, Daddy.
Come on, you coming up here? She's wondering what you got in the bag. You going to come up here? Come on in. Hello, baby dog. Hello, baby dog. Rosie's sad because Dan's not here. Hello. Say hello to everyone. Oh, a bit tired. We had a busy day yesterday, didn't we, Rosie? Nice long walk down by the beach. Yeah, I know. You like it, don't you? You like it, don't you, Rosie? Again, if you don't know, this is Rosie. The second best thing in the world. So, Dave Dillinger has come in on the Jazz Chorus 40 or 120 debate and says, I'm in the same boat, thanks for your question. I think it all depends on the drummer. I tend for the 120 for the rehearsal and 40 for the home use. Okay, so that's pretty loud. That's pretty loud. Leonardo Guiani says, any suggestion who to bring a Filmer sound amp to for a change to a linear volume pot, Southwest UK? Yeah, you need to go to Phil Harris. Now, I don't know how we do this, but Philip Harris has lent us, and I need to get it back to him, a Filmer sound conversion that he's made, and Phil is the man. I mean, he knows these things up, down, left and right. So, Philip, if you're in the chat and you can hook up with Leonardo here, but Phil is the man. Yeah. What else are we saying? Yeah, people talking about strings. Who else is in the chat tonight? Serial Frost. Mick, have you used the 29 pedals Una? If so, what was your impression? Yeah. I don't think we misunderstood it. But again, regular viewers will know the last thing I want is a buffer in my signal chain. Now, I appreciate the Una is designed so that you can have the buffer and have your fuzz so that it's not in the buffer, but I don't want the buffer in the first place, so it's not for me. But I do understand its uses and why people like it to enliven their rigs in that way. There's a few pedals like that. At the other end of the scale, somebody does something called the end of the world, I think, or the end, and that's a finalizer and a finisher, and usually those things fix problems or issues on pedal boards that don't have something like G3 on them. G3 negates anything like that for me personally because it's so clean sounding. You don't get all the tone suck of everything else. So, but yeah, the last thing I want is more buffers. I really, really don't like the sound of anything too buffered. Obviously, every pedal is buffered when it's on, but when it's off, I don't want additional buffers. I don't like what it does to the high end. So yeah, but you know people that really like them. A Stewart says, Mick, I played guitar poorly. Well, join the club, eh? For 30 years, never owned a tube amp. I look at my gear and wonder if any of it matters. I've given it space for a while and nothing speaks to me. What next? I don't know if what you're saying, A, is it sounds like what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong. You're looking at all your gear and you're saying, does all this gear make any difference? Because it's me playing and whatever I play, it all sounds the same. I think that's what you're saying. And if that is what you're saying, I totally agree with you. I'm going through exactly that at the moment, where you've got all this stuff. Dan and I have this massive embarrassment of riches. And the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom, maybe. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. We can think about these sayings. Sometimes having a great deal of knowledge about gear and having heard all the best stuff is the biggest handicap you can have as a guitar player. The biggest drawback. Sorry, I didn't mean to use the term handicap. And because you know, right? Because you've seen behind the curtain, you know what the wizard looks like. And you know that the only thing that really makes any difference is how you play. And we joke about it, you know. Would I rather hear Mike Landau on a Squier Affinity Telly through a Boss Katana? No disparaging to those products, by the way. Or me on my 61 Strat through a 2-rock. Well, Landau every day of the week, right? He's going to sound 20 times better than using that gear than I am using that gear, because he's a better player. Or at least he's a more advanced player. He's further along the journey, whatever term you want to use. More music comes out of him than it does me. And you can beat yourself up about that if you want. But that is a hiding to nothing, because that's all thoughts in your head. The only reason any of us should play is because we want to. And the only reason for playing, I think, is to make some sort of music. That might be different from you. You might get Dan gets great pleasure from sitting at home playing the guitar. I'd honestly rather watch the TV and have a glass of wine. What gives me pleasure is playing with other humans, creating something together, making music. And that is so invigorating. I find it so invigorating, and one of the best feelings you can ever hope to have. But you can only do it if you want to do it. And if you're saying that you don't want to do it, then put it down for a minute, let it be, and you'll get the urge again. But please, and we've all been through this as guitar players, for goodness sake, don't beat yourself up about feeling bad about it. I've done it. I've been through it. I'm coming out the other side of it as we speak. It's hard. Like I was talking about Tom Bukovac earlier. You know, you watch Tom and you're like, what is the point? What is the point of even playing the guitar when that sod exists? And the point is because you enjoy doing it. And if you're comparing yourself to him, the game's over. So don't, and just be in your own space. And then how do you find inspiration? I think you stop looking for it, honestly, because the more you're in your head, the worse it will get. Find an excuse to learn a song, play with a mate, take it out of the normal context of how you normally do it. And if you don't want to do any of that, just put it down for a minute. Don't do anything rash like selling all your gear and I'm giving up. We've all said that before. So yeah, if that's what you meant, I hope that some of that might have been helpful in just the sort of shared experience that we've all been through it. If that wasn't what you meant, that won't make any sense at all. Yeah. Someone's just saying, is Rosie's favourite song Black Dog? David Tompkins says, take up bass. Yeah, take up bass or acoustic guitar or sing or do something else musical. Yeah, it was Chris Quinn that said, is Black Dog Rosie's favourite Zepp tune? Yeah, cool. All right, let's take a couple more comments, and then I think we'll call it a day. Braden says, thanks TPS for keeping me sane. This is Braden. Thanks TPS for keeping me sane last year during a stressful, out of control work-life balance. I've left my job now, moved to a farm, and songs are coming back. Peace. Genuinely love this channel so much. Good for you, man. I hope you're feeling better. We can get ridiculously out of whack, can't we? So if you've brought some balance back, and we have been 1% helping that, that is a wonderful thing. David Burke says, I think it's also important to remember that some of the artists who've connected with the most people aren't these virtuoso players who us guitar nerds quite rightly idolise. Man, that is so true, David. Think about, I mean, I don't want to name anyone and suggest they're not a very good guitar player, but, you know, if you put Bob Dylan next to Tom Bukovac, I think it wouldn't take you too long to say who was the better guitar player. But who sold more records? Who's touched more people in their hearts through their songs? And that's not a better or worse thing. It's not even a comparison. It is underlining your point, David, that you don't have to be Nuno Bettencourt or Steve Vai to connect with somebody on a musical level. And I think that's worth a great deal. Yeah, a few comments on Book coming through. You know, he'll feel the same, right? He will feel the same for sure. He'll feel that he's never good enough. Because the only way you get better is if you feel you're not good enough. It's just the truth. I think you do get to a point where you stop beating yourself up about it, and you just realise that it's a journey. I hope. Ghost of Mozart says, seems to me, no, he says, there's one song that Mick seems to play a lot in the pedal videos, and I'm dying to know what it is and trying to learn it. Usually with clean reverb and slow, mellow and peaceful. I think, let's finish on this, Ghost of Mozart. What you're probably talking about is like a major scale harmonisation thing. It's probably this, and if it's not this, I apologise. Actually, it's probably one of two things. There's one thing that I play that is in E and basically is, you know... God. So we're 1, E major, 2, F sharp minor, 3, is it G sharp or A flat? I don't know. This is where my knowledge falls down. A flat minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, and all that is the major scale, right? But made into chord form. And whether it's Rolling Stone, didn't you? You can just trace hundreds and hundreds of pop songs to that basic chord progression. Well, I mean, they might not go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they might go 1, 4, 5, 2, 6. And then it's just picking out the melodies between them. Four, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I learned all that off Jerry Landreth. I said, what do I have to do to be a better guitar player? He said, learn the major scale, but learn it properly, i.e. all the harmonisations, and being able to pick out your majors and minors. I didn't get very far with it, but anyway, that's what I did. The other thing I play all the time is Natural Woman by Aretha Franklin, which is B major, I'm careful not to play it too much because obviously you'll get a copyright strike. It's actually by Carole King, to be fair. It's not by Aretha Franklin, but Aretha had the, for me anyway, the version that moves, like every single damn thing she sang. So we're playing B major, I guess, but I play that kind of John Mayer version of it. And then there's a lovely little trick where it would be, I don't even know what the next chord would be, but you slide your root note down 1 to the B flat, but you keep the top 2 notes in the chord the same. A, E. So it's just 5. And whatever that is, flat 5, I don't know. Passing note to the 4. So it might be that. And then we're into our major scale. Ever since I left you. 3, you made me feel. So it's one of those two things. I'm sorry, I can't explain it better. Groovy. Tim B, Mick, do you play your custom shop gold strap much? It's a great sounding guitar. Yeah, it's in this Friday's video actually. I do like it. It's a brilliant guitar. It tends to play spare guitar to my 61. Sounds quite different, but I have it set up similar. So, but I am using it more. I am using it more. Yeah, it's in this Friday's video. It is a really, really great sounding guitar. Really, really great sounding guitar. Groovy. Okay, friends. Thank you very much for being here. And apologies that it's just me and not Daniel, so we don't get any of that fun stuff. And yeah, Jules the Guitar Maniac. What is my latest strat? Is that for me? It's, well, the last one I bought was this one, which was a while ago now. 1961 refin. An utterly, utterly, utterly fabulous guitar. Just good. All right, thanks everyone. This is where I normally say to Dan, play us out, but I can't do that obviously because I can't. Have a great week. We'll see you Friday for a good old-fashioned challenge video, Dan versus Mick. Compact pedal board, sorry, compact rig, but it must be wet dry. So it's pretty good. Yes, I will send our love to Daniel. Cool. Thanks for being here, everyone. See you next week. You can, we'll fade out to the sound of Rosie gently chewing. Do some chewing, Rosie. See ya.